Hello, and welcome to our first Empowering Musicians podcast episode of 2023. I'm your host, Michael Manley, and I'm very happy to be welcoming Ron Ross, the host of SiriusXM's the Ron Ross Morning Show on SiriusXM Radio. Ron, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. It's great to be here. I appreciate the invitation, and I'm very excited to be joining you.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And I don't know if you've checked out my podcast, but I really talk to like an amazing array of people that are connected to the music business, not only musicians, but also composers, independent musicians, people that work in management. So it's great to have somebody on who I've never had before, which is a radio host. So let's talk a little bit about how you got into radio in the first place. Because before there was satellite radio, there was obviously terrestrial radio, right?
Right. Well, I grew up in Frederick County in Maryland. If you don't know anything about it, it's in central Maryland. If you look at Washington, D.C., it's northwest of that. And growing up in Frederick County, I went to University of Maryland, College Park, and I was a radio, television, and film major there. And I was going to go into TV. And then 1 year, I think it was after my freshman year, I was home. I was talking to my dad, and he says, you should cold call. He didn't say cold call. Now I know it's cold calling. He says, you call and see if you can sweep the floors somewhere. I'm like, all right. And that's literally what I did. I called and asked if I could sweep the floors. And I called a bunch of radio stations, and I saved my favorite for last, which was 107X, which was a rock station in Hagerstown, but they were licensed to Hagerstown, Frederick. And Hagerstown's in Washington County. It's a little bit farther away. And I called them, and I threw them everything I had at them. I'm University of Maryland, blah, 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 blah. I had no experience whatsoever. And they said, okay, well, we'll keep your name. And then I ran into another air personality. I was at a local nightclub, and I ran into one of the air personalities there because I found he was wearing a Kiss concert T-shirt, and I'd been at that show, and so I talked to him. That was the initial conversation. This is the 80s. This is 80. I keep forgetting. It's 83, I think. 83, because I was on the air for New Year's 84, and so anyway, long story short, he was an air personality. I threw everything I had at him, and he was at 107X. And so I called the next day, and then he put me in touch with the program director. He says, yes, we have your number. Yes, we know who you are. And wow. then about a month later, I got a call out of the blue from the radio station to see if I wanted to come in and do a demo. And that's it. I initially started working on the AM. It was an AM talk. No, I'm sorry. What was it called? Music of Your Life, WARK, 1490 WARK. And I was running Baltimore Orioles games. So okay. The Orioles games, I would sit there and run the game. It came in via satellite, and then from Memorial Stadium in Baltimore or wherever they were. And then I would turn down their feed to do local commercials. And then turn their feedback up. So it was all in the timing. And then I learned how to cue up a record. My mentor in the business, Buddy Reiser, did the overnights. He was called Rock and Rob on the air, and he came in, and I knew him. I knew the station. I loved the station. It was a dream come true to be working. It was a borderline hard rock station in Hagerstown, Maryland, blue collar town. And it was a dream come true. So he taught me how to cue up a record. I ran what they call the control board, and did what they call segues, running from one song into the next. And then he wouldn't let me leave until it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. He wouldn't let me leave until I did a live top of the hour ID. You have to give the city of license, and you have to give the call letters per FCC. And so I did. I had to get impossible call letters, by the way, because it was WXC. S, and you had to make sure you said C and not E as you were coming out of the X. And he taught me how to say W, not W. It's W. And sometimes you throw in, if you're having trouble, you throw in an extra syllable in there to say W. You stick an A in the middle just to make sure you say W. And I did WWX, more fun with a new one, WXCS Hagerstown Frederick, 107X Marks the Rock. And then went into the first song I played was Can't Explain by The Who. So,
wow.
But who remembers?
That's great. It's almost like practicing an instrument. Like you have to learn scales, you have to learn patterns. It's like vocal work is similar. Like you have to practice in a way.
Well, I'm a classically trained drummer as well. I'm a concert drummer. I took drum lessons from when I was 6 years old. Did all the rudiments and all of that stuff. And my goal was to be in a marching band in high school. But when I went to St. Joseph's Catholic High School in Emmitsburg, Maryland, there was no band.
Oh,
so,
wow. That's
I had moved from the rudimentary drumming to rock drumming. I had taken Carmine, a piece of Vanilla Fudge, had written a book, an instruction book. So I was learning that with where you lead the 3 lines or 4 lines at once, you know, because he I don't know if he originated, but he had the double kick drum. So as a musician, I had gone, and that was my initial focus when I went to Maryland, was I was going to go into a major in music. But those musicians were head and shoulders above any caliber that I was at the time. And I had a fascination with radio. And then, well, I'll tell you a story a little bit later about how I got to meet one of my idols and then got to work with one of my idols. But anyway, so yeah, you had to practice and learn diction, slow down. You know, when I would go and teach kids in school, or I would go and do like a career day in school, I told them that, you know, the most important thing to do is to learn to read and write the English language properly. Yeah. If you want to get into communication, you're going to be communicating. Absolutely. And then, you know, obviously it's going to be conversational English but then also back that up with another language. If you should learn Spanish, you should learn French or German or something like that, because being bilingual definitely is going to open up way more doors, if you'd like, if you want to make a career in broadcasting. Where I was a rock station. Like I said, it was a dream come true. I was 19, and then they changed the format to adult contemporary, light adult contemporary. And I had a program director say to me, well, if you want to be a broadcaster, then the format doesn't matter. And so I learned an important lesson there, which is, I don't necessarily, I mean, I work in the format that I love. And I eventually got to work at DC 101 in Washington, DC.
Yeah.
But because of that, I'll never, ever own an Eric Clapton record or a Leonard Skinner or any of that stuff, because I'm just so tired of hearing it. I played it like crazy.
Oh, wow.
You know, but the repetition after a while, you're just like, oh my God. You turn the monitors down in the studio, like, oh, please, I can't hear Boston. Long time. Foreplay, one long time, one more time. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I'm sorry, I digress.
No, but you don't think about getting tired of music. But like if you're a broadcaster, you're going to hear these songs over and over and over again. Like I don't think about that as a listener, you know.
It's funny, yeah, and there's some songs that you do get burned on, and then some songs that you don't. I just listened to the other day or yesterday. I have a mix that I have, and one of it was Since You've Been Gone, Kelly Clarkson. I don't know why. It's just one of those things that struck a chord with me. I never get tired of that song. I could hear it every day. I did when it was popular, but I could still listen. I could still listen to it again now. So you pick and choose the ones that you get really burned on. Although it's funny because knowing me, and I'm a rocker and a classic rocker, and I love all that stuff. And I grew up on the Beatles and Kiss and Rolling Stones and all that stuff, Led Zeppelin. And then the hair metal in the 80s, I was all about that. But I really, really dig a finely crafted pop song. I love my pop divas. I love my Britney, and Lady Gaga is a genius.
Yeah.
And not just, you know, in the songs, but just as a musician, as a composer, as a show person, you know, she's just, again, she's a genius. She's amazing. And I just love everything about it. So that, and Ava Max and who are the ones that Dua Lipa and all the little pop divas that are hitting now. I'm all about, if it's a good pop song, I'm in. I'm all in completely.
Well, I'm going to ask you a side question. What's the worst song you've ever had to hear?
That's a tough. I don't really categorize it as a worst song other than it's maybe it's not to my taste. I'm sure people love it. You learn in the business that you don't crack on the music that you play.
Right.
You don't, and so I mean, you're the cheerleader. You're the tour guide and the cheerleader. So you don't roll your eyes and say, "Oh my God, here's Hanson again." You're like, "Oh, hey, here's Hanson. It's a #1 song," and you're excited about it. So I don't really think of it in terms like that. Let's see, a song that I can't come up with one with that. I mean, I love all music. I love all genres of music. Mozart's my favorite composer.
Yeah.
Although I could do some serious Tchaikovsky. But I mean, I grew up, my daughters grew up listening to Eine Kleine Nacht music, like all the movements. They weren't all of the movements because I had a nice CD, and I would listen to that, and I listened to the Jackson 5's greatest hits. And those were the two in our apartment, and our little apartment that we had, especially with our older daughter, who's now 35, and she knows Metallica and the Beatles, and she forayed into country more than I did. But after my trip to Nashville with my wife for her birthday, I'm all in for country too. Finally crafted songs.
I'm a little bit on the fence with country, but there's some great country artists. I feel like the worst song in the Western canon has to be My Humps. Worst ever.
Really? Because I like Fergie. I like her a lot.
I like their other songs. I think that song is a problem.
Yeah, Big Girls Don't Cry, I think, is probably one of her best. Maybe in the poppy type stuff, not so much, but she did a cover of Barracuda that's ridiculous.
Wow.
She's really, really good. I mean, Ann Wilson, you're like, nobody can touch those vocals.
Right. You can't go near her.
Fergie's pretty good.
Yeah.
Fergie's pretty good. That's just say.
Great. So what music, excuse me, do you love to play? What, because I know you host a show called, or you're a program director for 90s on 9. So you're kind of an expert on that genre. How did you get into that?
All these gold records are for.
Yeah.
When I was a music director and assistant program director at Z104 in Washington, D.C. And so I played all the stuff that I'm playing now in the 90s when it was new. Yeah. So, I'm sorry, I digress. So what was your question again? What's the song do I like to listen to?
Yeah, so is that your passion? Like what is the pop music or the rock music that you're most passionate about?
Okay. Thank you very much for asking that.
Yeah.
Because I heard Paul McCartney say in an interview a long time ago, when people come over to his house, he doesn't play them Beatles records. He plays them outtake tapes or stuff from his favorite artists, growing up, Eddie Cochran and stuff like that. So when you come to my house, you're subjected to my playlist, and I built a playlist around this artist. And this comes from my days as a music director in Washington, D.C. There was a group called the Greenberry Woods, and it was two twins, Matt and Brent Huseman, from Middletown, Maryland, which is where I live.
Wow.
And they were signed by the same guy who signed the Ramones, and they had a contract with Sire Records, and they had an album out and a single called Trampoline. And I loved everything about that album. And it's very much 90s jangle rock, based in Beatles, harmonies, power pop, I guess I would describe it.
Okay. I
had a Greenberry Woods poster hanging up on my wall in the office at Z104 in DC. And a record company woman comes in and she says, "Hey, if you like them, see what you think about this." And she hands me a CD by a guy named Jason Faulkner. Jason Faulkner is a multi-instrumentalist. I think he's based out of LA. He was in Jellyfish for like one album, I think. So anyway, he was on Elektra Records. He had a solo album. It was called Jason Faulkner Presents Author Unknown. I remember popping that in and listening to it. And as I'm listening to it, Jenny's like, "Well, are you wowed?" I'm like, "Well, I'm one track into it." There was not a single track on that album, and I highly recommend listening to that. Not a single track on that album that's filler. Every song is ridiculous. He plays most of the album, most of the instruments on the album. And from there, I've kind of built out a big playlist of like, Lemonheads, Matthew Sweet, artists of that ilk from the 90s and early 2K, that kind of power pop that's kind of based, rooted in the DNA, goes back to Beatles. Not so much Stones, because they're more like blues. They're a blues band, but more, Beatles is a power pop band. So coming from that ilk, and so that's what I like to listen to. I've built a whole playlist around Jason Faulkner and that type of music from that era.
That's great. I'll have to check out those artists. When I think of 90s, because I'm not that deep into pop music, right?
Sure.
I'm a classic guy. But when I think of the 90s, I think of like Nirvana and grunge and like that whole movement, which was huge as well.
Right.
Does that music resonate with you, or were you more into like the pop stuff?
Okay, it's funny you should say that. All right. Does that music resonate with me? I understand. I told you earlier, I loved my 80s hair bands. I was all about it, Rat and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And grunge essentially killed all of that.
Interesting.
And those bands disappeared. They went away. If you talk to Mark McGrath of Sugar Ray, he's the lead singer of the band Sugar Ray. He is of the same mind, because he loved those hair bands too. And then here comes Nirvana and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam, and it was alternative, but it was kind of punk, but it was kind of, Neil Young had done it like 20 years before with Crazy Horse, that kind of all out angsty, bleak, nihilistic music that was coming out. That was like, wow. And it spoke to a generation. And it was innovative, and it launched so many other band careers. If you didn't have Nirvana, you wouldn't have Foo Fighters, or at least I don't think you would. I mean, Dave Grohl, I think, is just, again, I think he's a genius and probably one of the last great rock and roll band, U.S. rock and roll bands, American.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what I feel like. Is I love the music, but I also feel like there is a sense of performativeness and theatricality that was so present with the 80s hair bands, let's say, that did go away. And I think of that with some current artists who are just like, I'm just going to come out in a gray sweatshirt and look at my shoes and play a song. Whereas before, that aspect of live entertainment and the communication with the audience was huge. And I'll tell you my one story, which is I had a good friend who was playing the Donnie and Marie show here in Las Vegas.
Okay.
He got me tickets, and I was like, oh, this is going to be cheesy or whatever. I grew up watching their show. And I ended up being like leaving the show like with just total respect for them, because they're both in their 60s. And the way that they can form a relationship with every audience member and just create this electricity with the room is just something that the younger kids don't know how to do anymore, I don't think.
Right.
And it was just an amazing lesson in performance, I thought.
It's and it's funny, I've encountered performers like that. 50 Cent, believe it or not, back in the day in the 2K, great guy. He was really very smart businessman. But I'm in the club, bottle full of bub and all that stuff, the big hits. He came into the studio at the time I was at, good Lord, where was I? I marked periods of my life by what radio station I was at. Hot 99.5 at the time in Washington, D.C. It was a top 40. And he came in, I got to meet him. And it's just the pleasant, nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. Right. And then it was like, okay, well, let's take a picture. And he goes, all right, hang on, let me get into character. And he's like, and he gets it. I'm like, interesting. Yeah. So he was a savvy businessman and a great performer, because I got to see him live when he was on tour with don't tell me, All Time Lows on it. Gosh, I'm looking right at him. I can't remember not Panic at the Disco. No, never mind. I'll remember it later sometime. But I have found, though, with some of and this is what my younger daughter Carolina turned me on to, was these power pop punk bands coming out of emo type bands coming out in the 2K, like, well, Blink 182, I think would be more of a, they're kind of the pillars, one of the founders of Green Day, and they were carrying on in the tradition of Ramones and Sex Pistols and all that stuff. But, you know, they brought a more of a pop sensibility to it. And so you have bands like All Time Low coming out of Towson, Maryland, and Newfound Glory and bands like that, who have this incredible relationship with their audience.
Mm-hmm.
Their audience is loyal. In fact, I created a channel because of Carolina. I created a channel on SiriusXM called the Emo Project, and that caters exactly to those bands. You can find it. It's on the SiriusXM app exclusively. But I found that the theatricality and the performance came back with those bands, just, you know, because you got to be an athlete to do these shows now. It's amazing. I mean, they're drinking Gatorade and lifting weights backstage just so they could go out and give, you know, 90 minutes all that they have, and then the encores. Yeah.
And we do see people like Lady Gaga, who again is really theatrical and
yes. Oh, well,
in her work.
That's
so
right.
I just want to shout out to Rob. Rob Manley's watching us from Texas. He says his
hey,
daughter,
Rob.
Yeah, his daughter was wild for Good Charlotte. Tammy's watching from Corona, California, and a Facebook user, I can't identify who, says "Go Maryland, go Terps." So yeah, go Maryland.
Go Maryland. Go Terps.
Go Terps.
Go Terps, hon.
That's it. So what have you seen as far as like how bands are discovered, how artists build their careers now in this new era of like satellite radio versus the old terrestrial radio? Is it easier? Is it harder? Like what's it like now for, you know, a younger band coming up?
And this is all just my opinion and conjecture, just from my observations. And the artist I spoke about earlier, Jason Faulkner, was probably one of the greatest artists that never happened. He had 2 solo albums on Elektra, and then they dropped him, and then he put out some independent stuff. But he could have been bigger than he was, or than he is. He's still making music today. Mm-hmm. And I went to one of his shows in DC at the Black Cat, a club owned by Dave Grohl of Foo Fighters. And I met him backstage, and he says, so tell me about independent promoters. Because I guess he felt like his label wasn't pushing the record enough. And I said, well, you know, I worked with independent promoters. They get paid per ad per radio station. And I had a great relationship with an independent promoter. So it was tough to watch an artist like that, who clearly had the talent, clearly had the material, clearly had the resources, but did not have the way at that time to get the material out to the masses. Nowadays, you put together a good video, put together a something on TikTok that goes viral, and I mean, we've got a couple of artists that we're playing now on the Pulse that either they were on American Idol and they got their name out there on Idol, but then they didn't win or whatever. And so they went back and they still made a lot of contacts in the business and recorded and put stuff up on TikTok, and it just went viral and it gets crazy. And then we add it. And in fact, they've become such a force. We have our own channel, TikTok Radio, on SiriusXM that caters exactly to these content providers. So the artists today, I mean, and one of them, if I can brag on, you know, I was talking about the daughters earlier, is Carolina's got her own band called Swerves. And that's exactly what she's doing, is she's trying to move in that direction. She lives in Philadelphia, moved to Philadelphia, and she, because she likes that scene, but she's using that music scene to try to catapult and move her band in that direction. I said, look, you got to give me an hour. I want to sit down and talk to you and let you know what I know. But I think she could probably tell me a little bit more about what she knows, especially now in today's landscape. So it's really all about getting exposed, is getting your stuff out on the internet, and either it's YouTube or whatever it is. TikTok seems to be a big one, and if you have a big Instagram page, and make a splash. But it all comes down to, it's got to be quality.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be quality. It's got to be good. If it's not good, you can make a video all day long. Nothing's going to happen. It's got to be good. So the talent and the drive, and to write a good song, perform a good song, produce a good song, and be a good musician or a singer or what have you, that still has to be in place.
Yeah.
And then a lot of hard work, and then a lot of luck if you're going to get noticed.
Yeah, absolutely. And the whole landscape is different now. And I'll share just an experience where I was in a new town. I was looking for a brunch restaurant. My boyfriend and I were both looking, and I was looking on Yelp and he was looking on TikTok. So
right.
it's like, okay. And he's a little younger than me. So I was like, wow, this is interesting. But I think that whole thing is like TikTok is where it's at for a lot of generations. And for me, I get like social media exhaustion. Like, I can deal with Facebook, maybe one other app. I can't do 17 things. And so it's a little tiring, but TikTok has been really transformative. And I actually think I used to be a watcher of American Idol, much to the shame of some of my colleagues. But what I loved about it was that, like, it was so democratic, right? They weren't necessarily sending talent scouts out to Nashville to find, to discover people. And then, it was truly a democratic process. You had a blind audition, and there was a lot of people that would never get noticed otherwise. And it was always usually like the guy or the girl who got like voted off 7th or 5th or something, who was the most interesting musician. But there was always like a generic person that would win, but still they would never have been seen and gotten that far without that show. So I actually think it did a lot of good for a lot of musicians.
I think so too. And it was, I used to be excuse me, I was the program director of Pop 2K too, which was 2000 to 2009. Just all of those, that top 40 era. And somebody asked me what were the biggest pop culture indicators of the decade, and clearly number one was 9/11. Number two were the things that came off of that, was like home improvement shows and all that stuff. They came off of that because people weren't traveling, so they would, and then you had the competition shows with Survivor and American Idol. And American Idol, I mean, look at Kelly Clarkson's career. Look at oh goodness, I can't remember her name now in country music. She's just unbelievable.
Carrie Underwood.
Carrie Underwood. Thank you. God,
huge.
I don't know where my mind was going, but yeah, Carrie Underwood, who is just now, I mean, country music didn't take her very seriously until now. She's good. And same thing with Kelly Clarkson. But then with their success, it's just become that was just the door to get them in. Clearly, again, it was the talent and the hard work that got them to where they are. That was just one of those. The American Idol was just a door, that and The Voice and other avenues like that can help you move in that direction.
Yeah, America's Got Talent is such a train wreck sometimes, but like there was a young woman, I think she was from Australia, and she was really heavily on the spectrum, very nonverbal in a way. And she comes out on stage and she just like starts channeling Janis Joplin. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen, but it was also amazing because she was so talented.
Right.
And one of my favorite artists who I did get to see live is Puddles Pity Party, I have to tell you. I don't know if you know Puddles, but I love him.
I know of him. I don't know him that well, though. I know of him.
But I wanted to say, because you do get in your job, like, to interview a lot of really interesting artists, right?
Yes.
So who were some of the people that you were most excited to meet? You said you met your idol at one point.
I got to interview Elton John.
Wow.
Sir Elton John.
Yes.
And I was in this little room right here, my daughter's old bedroom, which we've converted into a studio. I'm in my home.
Nice.
And I think I even had a Spider-Man blanket backdrop. And then he's got this unbelievable, I don't even know what you would call it, a bureau with this silver tea set on the, in the background. I'm like, oh my God. But I was just remembering the years and years I had Elton John's greatest hits, Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy. That album is my all-time favorite Elton album. I know everybody says Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, but no, that one, Rock of the Westies. And I'm looking right at, and I'm speaking to the man. It was amazing. I got to speak to Bob Newhart, another legend in entertainment that, to my audience, I had to, relate because he's Papa Elf in the movie Elf. But I mean, to me, it's Bob Newhart, man. He was everywhere on television as I was growing up. And then even my parents would love, the fact that I spoke to Bob Newhart. So it was pretty amazing to speak to that. Musician wise, I've gotten to meet, pretty much everybody. The thing I like about, what I'm doing now and what I did when I first started working at XM, before the merge, there were two different radio stations, there were two different radio companies. There was XM and Sirius. And I worked at XM in Washington, D.C. And it was a channel, it was called Flight 26, which is turned into the Pulse, the one that I'm on now. But I was doing mornings, and I got to meet a bunch of musicians and artists before they were big. Wow. They were just coming up. I was leaving the studio and Katy Perry slams right into me. And it was like, oh God, sorry, excuse me. And then, cause she was there to be on another channel, but I got to meet her. And then, I did an interview with a 19-year-old, I think, Adele.
Wow.
Who was just coming off of her first US tour, and she was hungover.
That's great.
And then we got into an argument about where she was from. And I'm like, well, then I'm right. And she goes, well, you're not wrong. I'm like, then I'm not wrong. So, wow. But she was a lot of fun. And Colby Calais and those artists from the 2K, Sarah Bareilles, when she was just up and coming, her first album, Little Voice. Wow. And she was just a lot of fun. And just artists at that time of that, John Mayer, and it's after a while, and I don't mean to come off as being callous. I mean, people are like, well, you met this person, you met this person, you met this person. I'm like, yeah, it's also work. Remember, this is what I do for a living, so it's part of the deal. But I do get jazzed a lot, and I think I wrote to you, the one guest that I got the most jazzed about was Bert and Ernie from the Muppets from Sesame Street. Come on, they were my superheroes. I grew up with them. I watched them when I was 6 years old, when Sesame Street first came on. There you go. I just dated myself. But to talk to Bert and Ernie, and I made Ernie laugh, that was a dream come true. I was in tears.
That's amazing. I toured with a show called Miss Saigon, and we were playing, and we were in Pittsburgh, and Mr. Rogers came to one of our shows.
Oh my!
And he came backstage, and I got to meet him, and it was almost like I broke down in tears. It was
right, exactly, right.
Like, oh my God, you're Mr. Rogers. So that was pretty cool, and
that's awesome. Wow!
And he got little headshots with his signature for all of us, which was really nice. I hope I still have mine somewhere. It's probably in a box in my garage now, but that was a thrill.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the musicians that I've met, I mean, I've Steven Tyler of Aerosmith, and I've had the opportunity, but I couldn't take advantage of it because, again, like I told you, I grew up on like the Beatles and Kiss and stuff like that. Kiss was doing something in New York, and it was just in that studio, and it was maybe 15 people were allowed in there, and I could have just pulled a string and gotten in there, but I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So, and they keep offering me, do you want to talk to Gene Simmons? Do you want to talk to Paul Stanley? And I'm like, yeah, but it's not for my audience. I mean, I'd love to talk to him, but I don't think my target audience on the Pulse is really going to care.
Wow.
Why are you talking to that Dino rocker? I'm like, this is for me, not for you.
Yeah, right. That's funny. I got to also meet, on more the classical side, I got to meet Yo-Yo Ma, which was fun. and I got to meet John Williams. Well, I shook John Williams' hand and said like 5 words to him. And that was like the ultimate, because John Williams is like, you know, for me, the greatest living American composer, right? And his output is just staggering. So that was a thrill. Yeah.
I would like to meet Danny Elfman, just because of the unbelievable pieces that he's come up with, and it's just, you know, it's ridiculous. I mean,
yeah, he's a great film composer as well.
Yeah, from the first Batman to 1989 Batman, I just love, he came up with the theme. That was the theme to Batman. You're like, oh, okay, I'm on board. This is it. It was great.
Yeah, great stuff. I did want to ask you, because one of my favorite channels, and maybe it's on the app, I haven't checked out the app yet, but I just recently got back onto SiriusXM. I haven't been a member for years because I was a New Yorker without a car, and mostly you don't listen to XM unless you have a car, in my experience. But but like they used to have a channel called Cinemagic, which was just—
It's still there. It's on the app. Cinemagic.
Oh, it's on the app. Okay.
It was on the app. I was listening to Cinemagic Halloween time. We have a Halloween channel that goes on, but I tend to listen to Cinemagic, and I would, when we had a lot of trick-or-treaters and my girls were younger, I would put the speakers out and I would put it on Cinemagic and just listen to those soundtracks. They would play soundtrack to Psycho and the soundtrack to, you know, The Breed, and, you know, it's just, and it was, you know, I'm like, okay, this is the good stuff right here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love Cinemagic. Yeah, we still have it. It's on the SXM app. So
yeah. So has satellite radio and just kind of the expansion of outlets of content delivery, right? Has that created more opportunities for broadcasters, for example, and for folks to get into what you do in the business?
Yes and no. They're doing a lot of what they call consolidation, where someone you wear many hats. In the day, you know, I do a morning show, a live morning show on nationwide morning show on the Pulse, but I'm also the program director. That used to be 2 separate jobs. Now it's one. And you have a lot of people that work very, very hard doing a lot of things. If you really want to be in broadcasting, though, it can happen. I used to mentor a bunch of interns, and for like 4 or 5 of them, I'm very proud, actually got jobs at SiriusXM and got to work at SiriusXM and move up very high in what they're doing. One of my first interns, Jill, she's now in sports and she's a big muckety muck up in the sports department, because and this is one of those things where apply your skills, whatever you can, and never say no and take the first job that's offered to you. She was bilingual. She spoke Spanish, and she knew baseball because she had been a mascot for a baseball team in Rhode Island, where she's from. So they wanted her to run the Spanish language broadcasts. Okay. And she went to Spanish language because we had Major League Baseball and we had all the teams. And so she ran the Spanish language broadcasts of Major League Baseball, whatever particular game was, because she understood the language, and she could type up the scores and put that on the screen and all that stuff. And from there, she's just moved up like that. Right. I'd have to say a lot of it is, it's not necessarily all in who you know, but it's all in who you know. And I mean, when I first started working in Hagerstown, from there, the guy the mentor, he helped get me a job at DC 101. From DC 101, that helped me get me in the door again at another position. I was working at Z104 in Frederick, and then that became Z104 in DC, and then, you know, whatever. So it was just like a bunch of people that I knew, like, oh, what's going on? Or that I would get a call and I apply for a position, and you have to audition and fill out all the paperwork and do all the things, but still I was alerted to the position from the person who was working there. So the opportunities are there, especially in broadcasting or in radio, but you got to be willing to work your way up. You're not going to be walking in, at least I don't think you're going to be walking in and getting a program directorship for a channel. It has happened, though. It has happened. It's possible, but you got to really, work for it and want it and use your skills. Oh, you froze. Oh, you're still frozen. Are we back?
Oh,
we're back.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. One last question, I guess, before I know we've gone a little bit over, but I just want to know, what do you do as a program director? Like, what is that job for because you're the program director of one channel, right? Or a couple?
Yes. No, I'm program director of 90s on 9. No, thankfully, I mean, I had Pop 2K, but they gave that to another wonderful, capable program director because I was just getting stretched a little thin. So for 90s on 9, it's different nowadays than it was, back when I first started working with a program director. But I'm the big picture guy of the channel, and I envision where it's going to go. I mean, you have a finite amount of music, so the whole point is to find out exactly which ones the listeners want to hear more often, play that more often, and try to package it in an entertaining and innovative way. And again, be a tour guide, give them something a little different that's not just a playlist. I mean, I curate the playlist myself with a lot of research, and I put together the music logs every day. And then I work with the air talent. We have Downtown Julie Brown, former MTV VJ, who is a daily host. And then Lisa Loeb just came on board not too long ago, another great artist from the 90s, and she does a daily show. So I work with them. And Mark McGrath from Sugar Ray, I spoke about him earlier. He has a feature on our channel as well. So I manage all of that, manage that personnel. I do the marketing. Well, we have a marketing department, but I come up with a plan, and we're like, hey, let's move in this direction or move in that direction. I write what they call the imaging, all the stuff that's in between the songs. When you hear an industry term, bumper, sweeper, something like that in between the songs, something pithy. I mean, I had a series called Nothing But 90s. Then you put a lot of sound effects in between where you that's recognizable to the decade, like a dot matrix printer, or the Windows 95, or the Seinfeld, those three in a row, and Nothing But 90s, and then into the next song. It's just trying to evoke an emotion that time. So I write all of that, and we have an image director who puts that all together. And but it's very collaborative because I also work with a great assistant music programmer who works with me. Sean does an inordinate amount, above and beyond amount of work. So it's very collaborative. But for the most part, the 90s on 9, like I said, the playlist is finite. So my skill comes in trying to make sure that the listener hears what they want to hear when they want to hear it.
Wow.
Which is it's math. It's a lot of math.
Yeah.
With the number of songs and when are they listening, when are they in the car, the most times, opportunities for them to listen, and what are their favorite songs, and are they tired of hearing this song? Do they want to hear more often? Is it too unfamiliar? I mean, there's a lot of great music that came out, and I get that too, which is just play everything. Well, you can't play everything because you can. Yeah. And I do play, I'm going to say 97% of the stuff that came out in the decade. But some more often than others. They want to hear maybe Backstreet Boys more often than they would hear Jan Arden. Mm-hmm. Just to name another great artist, but, wasn't necessarily popular. So I'm just trying to gauge that. It's a little balancing act.
Yeah. Well, I listen. I have to tell you, I think I toggle between 3 shows in my channels right now in my car. One is the Broadway channel. The other is the classical channel, Symphony, I think it's called.
Yes.
And then I go over to like MSNBC News because I don't have cable and I have no other access to live news. So
sure. Yeah.
I listen to like those 3, but I'm looking forward to downloading the app and knowing that I can listen to Cinemagic now. It's really exciting.
Cinemagic is there, and then we have, and on the app, and at the risk of sounding like an advertisement, you've got gosh, at least 50, maybe even more channels on the app alone.
Wow.
But in the emo project would be one of those. And you also have, like, just for instance, for 90s on 9, you have all these different breakout channels. We have 90s on 9 workout. We have 90s on 9, the top 100, 90s on 9, you can hear 90s on 9 just music if you don't want to hear any of the anything else that goes with it. I mean, there's so many other things that you can do. We just came off of the holidays, and there were so many great. I'm a Christmas guy. I'm just all about the holiday. You're talking to me in a really, really sad part of my life right now as we're undecking the halls.
Yes.
But we had all of those holiday channels that were on. It was like hard to pick because there was holly and there's jolly and you had country Christmas and and all of that exists. Some of them are on the radio, and then some of them, and all of them exist on the app. So
yeah. And Rob says it's hard to leave 18. I don't know what channel 18 is. I don't. Do you know what channel 18?
Off the top of my head, hold on. I have the internet.
Rob's making it hard for us. So
what's that?
He's making it hard for us. I don't know what channel 18 is.
I'll figure it out.
Beatles. Rob says.
Oh, the Beatles channel. Oh, was that 18?
That makes sense. Okay, got to check that out.
Yeah, the Beatles channel is ridiculous. They did such a great job with that. I wanted to be involved, but they had a whole bunch of experts all ready to go, and this is in conjunction with the Beatles, with the company, and so you had to do it right. And so you'll get Beatles selections, you get solo selections from all of the artists, and then you get songs they grew up on. So there's Elvis in there, and like I said, Eddie Cochran and other great artists, Fats Domino and stuff, like the R&B stuff that they grew up on. Yeah. And then you get cover versions, and you have special theme shows, and 8 songs a week. And then you have artists that come in, and different artists and personalities that play their favorite. My Fab Four. I've yet to be a guest on that show, but I don't know if I could pick 4 Beatles songs. And it's just that's a ridiculous channel. It is hard to tune away from the Beatles channel. That's we have a lot of great artist breakout channels. Bruce Springsteen, E Street Radio has his own channel, and the Pearl Jam has their own channel. And it's Lizzo just had a little micro channel just a little while over the new year, but she had her own channel. And Ariana Grande had her own channel. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool when we get to put together an artist channel. I especially like the AC/DC channel when that was on. That was a while back, but I really dug that one.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. It's so fascinating to learn about how, what your life is like there at SiriusXM.
It's fun. It's the best job I've ever had in my career, and it's the hardest job I've ever had in my career as well. And just in that, being on the air, that's I'm not going to say it's effortless, but it's second nature to me, and I love doing the show, and the listeners are the best part of my day. Sometimes with when I get a lot of feedback. I mean, earlier this week, I forget what we were talking about. Your favorite sandwich or something like that, and just get the it could be anywhere. And the listeners on the Ron Ross Morning Show are just the absolute best, and it really is. It's humbling when you see the connection that you get with these people when they're going to work or working from home or driving the kids to school. I get a lot of that, driving the kids to school. They like the question of the day, and I try to make it universal so that the kids can get in on the action as well.
That's great.
It really is the best job. And then I get to commute. My commute is up the stairs now.
Yeah.
Yeah. The worst part is, there might be an overturned cat on the stairwell, but other than that,
love it.
I mean, I was always, when I grew up in Frederick County, I'm always an hour away from everything. My high school was an hour away. University of Maryland was a little bit longer, an hour away. At the time, my first job was 45 minutes away. And then working in DC was an hour and a half. I worked on the other side of DC when I was at Extra 104. I mean, it's just, everything was an hour away. And now it's about 75 seconds away when I'm coming from downstairs.
That's great.
It is the best.
Is your morning show talk only, or do you mix it up with music? Or
no, it's a music show. It's a music show. The Pulse is a music show, or as a music channel, adult contemporary. So we play the Dua Lipa, and that's how I got to talk to Elton John, because he had a song with Dua Lipa, and so it's just I do the little things in between. Our plug line is, we have I play today's Pulse. We have some information you can use, and we have a little fun. We play games and stuff like that.
That's on Channel 5 on X.
Channel 5, the Pulse.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I'm on weekday mornings, 6 a.m. East to noon East. Wow. I have to think in time zone terms now, which is funny because my brother lives in California, and he can only listen to me if he gets up early, because I go off at 9 a.m. on the West Coast.
Wow!
So he can only hear me when he gets up early. He has occasionally when I crack on him.
That's funny.
That's my brother. What are you gonna do, right?
Yeah. Let me have my coffee at 4 a.m. and listen to my brother.
That's right. I'm coming on at 3 a.m. your time.
Right.
So if you want to hear the whole show.
Yeah. So how do folks connect with you if anybody has questions and want to follow up? Is it best to find you on Facebook, or what's the best way to connect with you?
Go to the Pulse page. The Pulse page on Facebook. It's at SXM the Pulse, and I'm there, and I read every comment, email that comes in, and I respond to every one of them. And I'll warn you, there's an auto response. I didn't put it on there. I don't know. The company did. There's an auto response. Don't worry about that. So you get this auto, hey, thank you for writing to us. We appreciate your feedback. And then I'll be right underneath that going, hey, how's it going, Michael? It's good to talk, but I'll be there at SXM the Pulse there. All of our socials on our Twitter and our Instagram. That's at SXM the Pulse. And I'm there. And you can connect with me that way. So,
well, thank you so much for sharing so much of your afternoon here with us today. And
are we going to mention that we're family, Michael?
Oh, that's right. Yes. Yeah, so Ron is my cousin-in-law, and we are both Marylanders, right?
That's right. Right.
And it's funny because you mentioned how you got into the business was like sweeping up the floors and stuff.
Yeah.
I ended up, you knew my mom, right? So
yeah.
I ended up going to a music camp and finding out that there was a man who made French horns that lived a mile away from me down the mountain. And my mom was like, well, we have to go meet this person and we have to introduce ourselves and everything. And I ended up doing stuff like that, like spraying wasp nests around his shop and painting and stuff.
Right.
And sadly, I think, he and his sons, they ran the business. They gave me a bunch of tubing that I quickly ruined very quickly. And they decided that I was not going to be a horn repair person or a horn maker. But
that's a shame.
Sorry. Yeah, but as a horn player, it was great because I got to meet all these great horn players that were coming to his shop and stuff. So similar kind of story. But I look forward to seeing you in Maryland or Las Vegas if you ever get out here.
Oh, we're coming to Vegas, baby.
Dude.
Well, my California brother loves Lady Gaga, so we got to try to find something, somehow get into the Gaga show when she's back and doing her residence. And I'll go to the jazz show. I don't need to go to the pop show. I want to go to the jazz show. Have you seen that one?
I haven't seen that one. The Lady Gaga one, I've heard about it, right?
Yeah. I want to go. So we will come out and I want to do, there's a restaurant I want to do, was it Craft Steak, I believe? Tom Colicchio's got one. The chef Gordon Ramsay's got and say what you will, but Guy Fieri has a Vegas restaurant I want to try. I love Guy. I got to meet him. I got to talk to him. I haven't gotten to talk to Alton Brown yet.
Oh, I love Alton Brown.
Excuse me. That's one of my goals, is to meet and talk to. But I did get to talk to Tom Colicchio and that whole crew from that show. So
that's great. One of the things that people don't know about the Las Vegas food scene is that like a lot of it is invisible because it's happening in sad-looking strip malls way off the strip.
Okay.
Like we have an amazing Chinatown here that nobody knows about.
That's it. You got to take us. You're our tour guide, right?
I'm your tour guide. I have a small group of people in my town, a group of us that I call the Intrepid Vegas Food Posse. So we will do a tour with you.
Please, I am begging you. And if we come to Vegas and I don't see you, that's criminal.
No, that would be criminal. And so we're going to make it happen. And let me know when you guys want to come out. And thank you so much for being here today.
Michael, oh, by the way, Jennifer wanted me to say hi to you.
Oh, yes. Please,
Jenny, I'm like, come in and say hi yourself, but she didn't.
Well, cousin Jennifer will have to make an appearance on our next episode. So
yes. Hey, Michael, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was very nice. And it's nice to reconnect with you. And we see each other on Facebook every now and then. Excuse me. I don't know why this is happening now. Thank God it's live on the air. And and again, I really am I'm so humbled that you would ask me to be on your show. I appreciate that. And congratulations on all the work that you do for musicians. To be an advocate for musicians, I myself am a musician, and we just play around in bands. I play in a band with your cousin Mark. Mark and I are playing in a band, and again, we're trying to get out there and play, and we got to put up a page and take pictures and get recorded, and but I'm making connections and shaking hands. And so I think what you're doing is extremely important, especially for musicians and composers, to help them along the way and what they're doing with in crafting their art, so that their art can be enjoyed by many. And I really, really do appreciate the work that you do. Thank you.
Well, thank you. One of my first guests was composer Jared Tate, a Chickasaw composer living in Oklahoma. And I was thrilled because I was on the XM Symphony channel, and I looked over and it was one of his pieces. So he's actually getting played on XM. So it's really funny how everything is connected. But
that's amazing.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to bringing you back one time for a second episode and seeing you in Vegas.
You have to do an episode showing us your ugly lamps that you keep exchanging with your sister.
I do have an interesting lamp and owl collection, and
I see the owl over your shoulder.
I have a collection of depressing coffee mugs. This one depicts the destruction of the Bikini Atoll with an atomic bomb. That's from the National Atomic Testing Museum here in Las Vegas, which I'm also going to take you to. So.
God bless you. That's the best ever.
Well, it's been really wonderful.
Depressing coffee mugs.
Oh yeah, I'll have to feature them on my next. I'll have to feature one every episode. That's the new theme.
There you go. See,
along with jackets. So
I love it.
Well, great to see you, Ron, and I look forward to seeing you in Las Vegas soon. And we'll see you all on the next episode. Take care.